Okay, welcome everyone. We are starting with the second of our N4 slash pre-intermediate lessons. Last week we had our first one, and we're going to review it a little bit specifically because it is tightly linked with the one that we're doing this week. When you, um, when excuse me, when we are the depression grammar. Yes, it. I'm going to give you a lot of information that's not in this lesson that I think is hopefully going to help explain some of the nuance and usages with these. But last week we were talking about these three. Actually, I'll go ahead and tap this. We were talking about these three guys. あげる, くれる, and もらう. And last week we were focusing on using these to describe the giving and receiving of things, physical or non-physical objects. I gave my brother a cookie. My brother gave a cookie to me. I received a cookie from my brother. Why are all these cookies being given back and forth and not eaten immediately? We were focusing on objects that are being moved back and forth. So let's real fast go back over that because that's going to be used in today's lesson. So the first one is moral. And moral is different from the other two, and that moral focuses on the receiving of something. Moral is when you focus on the receiving, which if you're focusing on the receiving, which person is more important? The person receiving it or the person giving it? My question should have given the answer away by the way I phrased it. But if we're focusing on receiving it, yes, it's the receiver. So if I say, watashi wa cookie o moratta. I received a cookie. You can use this to not even mention the person that gave it to you. You can just drop it out. You can just say, I got a cookie. I received a cookie. And if you do mention them, if you do talk about the person, they gave it to you, then you would typically use the kara. Oh, except you wouldn't put it in that spot. Let me fix that for you. Excuse me. There we go. Watashi wa Kao kara cookie o moratta. I got a cookie from Kao. So moral was is used to focus on the receiving. The other two, the ageru and the kureru, are the opposite. They're the giving. Ageru is focusing on the giving. Kureru is focusing on the giving. And so if that's the case, who's more important? Well, the giver. The giver is what's coming first. It's giver wa ageru, or it's giver wa kureru. And so what's the difference between these two? We talked about this last week, but to summarize, ageru and kureru only differ in who is receiving it. And specifically, kureru is used to show something that's being given to you being the speaker or the I, that I am getting, or that my in-group, my family is getting. And please check out our previous video if you want a bit more discussion on this in-group, out-group thing. We're not going to touch on it too much today since we covered it last week. So kureru is typically used for I receiving things. My teacher gave a paper to me, or Kao-chan gave a cookie to me. Ageru is used for every other situation. Kao-chan gave a cookie to a dog, which is, do dogs eat cookies? I'm not sure. My mother gave, a stack of cookies to her friends. Kureru is focused just on the I receiving it. With that in mind, we're going to see a lot of examples, but what we're learning about today is taking those same concepts and switching over from things, cookies, switching from cookies to actions. And you might think, how can you give and can you get actions? Well, not really. But what you can do is you can do actions for other people. You can have actions done for you. And with these, the word that's on the screen, it says favors. And I'm going to expand that out a little bit and not just say favors. I'm going to talk about beneficial actions. These are actions that benefit someone else. That's being done for someone else. This could be helping someone. This could be baking a cookie for them. This could be driving them to school. Anything that's being done for the purpose of someone else. That's what we're talking about today. And with this, we've talked about the te form a whole bunch, and it's rearing its ugly head again today. The te form is used to describe these. And just like before, we're going to start, with actually with all of them. But let me give you a few examples. First, we're going to see them all together, and then we're going to break it down a bit. Now, before we had these objects, we had the cookies, given and getting cookies. Now, there might be an o attached to the action that's being done, but there's no implicit, the ageru or the kureru or the morao, they are not receiving the action anymore. Before, it was literally giving a cookie to someone. However, now, ageru, kureru, morao, they're not the actual action. They're describing that the action is being done for someone. They're turning into what I call, and what a lot of textbooks call, helper verbs. They come after the main verb to help describe something special about that verb. Let's take some look at some examples. Okay, these are not full sentences. These are just little chunks, little snippets, but let's look at these three. And we're going to expand them out into full sentences in just a minute. Yonde ageru. What's the action here? The action is read. The ageru, to give, so we're not giving anything. We're not like, hey, here's a book, and we're not throwing the book at the person. The only action going on here is the reading. But the reading is being done for someone else's benefit. That's what the ageru is conveying. Same with the second sentence. Ryori o shite kureru. Cooking is being done, and it's benefiting someone. Last one, oshiete morao. Oshieru, teaching. That's the action. Something is being taught for someone's benefit. It's not two actions. Before, when we learned the te, we'd often see the te was used to link actions. So if we said, tabete nonda, I ate and I drank. That's two separate actions. But in this sense, it is not two separate actions. It's just the first action with the second verb, the helper verb, helping that first one, giving more information to that first verb, that first action. And we talked about this a second ago, but just to have this here for you to show the directionality with these things, ageru is used for actions when they are going anywhere but into your circle. As long as an action is not being done for your benefit or for your inner circle's benefit, then you use ageru. So looking at the screen, if I am doing something for my family, I use ageru. If I'm doing something for someone else, it's ageru. If my family is doing something for someone else, it's also ageru. If someone else, two random people are one's doing something for someone else, it's ageru. As long as it's not coming back to me, it's ageru. Kureru is for everything that's coming back in my direction. If someone bought a ticket to the movies for me, that's kureru. If someone bought a house for my family, wow, that's amazing. Thank you. That's kureru. Ageru is going everywhere but towards the family, towards you. Kureru is coming towards you. And we'll see those in the examples. So let's jump into some examples. We're taking, we have all three in here. And let's look at this first sentence. おじいさんに本を読んであげます。Now, before we even talk about this, I'm going to type this out one more time. I'm inside of the channel. Now look at this sentence. This doesn't use anything new. It just says, I read a book to, to my grandpa, to my grandfather. This is totally fine. This sentence is totally okay. What it doesn't do is it's probably not used that often, because if you read a book to your grandfather, presumably you're not punishing your grandfather. You're not reading a book about your grandfather's failures. You're probably reading a book to your grandfather to help, to do something nice for your grandfather. Perhaps they're resting and you want to read them a book, or their eyesight is not what it used to be and you'd like to read something for them. Typically speaking, if you read something for someone, you're doing it for their benefit. And so you use this te agemasu, or in this case, the te form is de, but you add that agemasu to the end to say, I'm doing it, and it implies that you're doing it for their benefit. So oji-san ni, that's the person receiving the action, and it's the same ni structure that we used with ageru before. Oji-san ni hon o yonde agemasu. I read a book to my grandfather, with the underlying message that it is benefiting that person. And again, this one, remember, ageru is used as long as the action is not coming back to yourself. Say that one more time, because I know this is the thing that is the hardest to remember. Ageru is used when the action is not coming back to yourself. So this, we're actually going to stop right now. And we're going to practice this a little bit. Let's talk about, think about something you've seen in the last day or 2 days or a week, whatever. And think about something you saw where someone did something for someone else. And that someone else was not you. This isn't something that someone did for you. This is something that someone did for someone else. And I'm going to use the same notation that we used before. The giver is doing something. They're giving an action. It's no longer a thing. They're giving an action, and they give it to someone else. And that's the receiver. That's whoever's receiving it. So I'm going to talk about my wife, because I know she, she played. What did she do? Oh, she showed them something. She showed my kids something on her phone. I think it was a video of dancing. Saki wa Ryo ni video o misete ageta. she showed a video to Leo. And it probably wasn't a video of, puppies crying. So it was probably something he enjoyed. My kids are into dance right now, as they saw some yosakoi dancing recently. And so it might have been a video of some yosakoi dancing. And so she showed him a video. And then in parentheses, for his benefit. So the action itself can be as simple or as complex as you want. It might just be a single verb and nothing else. It might have extra things. It might have a location. It might have a direct object. You might have a whole bunch of other particles in there, but you can keep it simple. So think about something. It could even be you. It could be something that you did for someone else. But try typing this out and saying, I or someone else did this thing for another person. That's a really good question. And before I answer that question, Mayo, the usage you use is totally okay. But it's using the one that we used last week. So let me give you a hint as to how you could change that. What if the client, which would probably usually be okyaku, the guest or the customer, what if they bought fruit for your bosses? Then you could say, katte ageta. Kao is the verb. And then because they did it for the benefit of someone else, katte ageta. And Grace, to answer your question, this uses a verb conjugation or verb form that we haven't learned yet. And it's usually put more towards the end because it's kind of a crazy one. It's called causative. And so it would probably be tabe. Sorry. It would probably be something like tabe sasete ageta. And causative form is not something I can get into today because it's kind of a big topic, but that's probably how it would be used. You might also say something more literal. You might say they put the food in the kid's mouth, and that might be something like this. 口に食べ物を入れてあげた. So 入れる, there's your action. There's your putting in. And then we toss that helper verb あげる on the end of it, which is saying, oh, it's being done for their benefit. Cooked is 料理をする. レシ。そう、料理をしてくれた。And I'm just jumping back up. Yuya, your sentence. 配信, the verb is 配信する. So it wouldn't be 配信て, it would be 配信して. 配信して. So just toss a sheet in there and you'll be good. Now, let's continue. So we've got this ageru, and Reshi's cheating by jumping into the next sentence. But the next one would be the kureru. Now, there's not just the literal meanings of these next few sentences, but there's also some usage patterns. Not usage patterns, I'm going to say usage profiles that come in with these that you often don't see in textbooks, but I think this will help you out. So let's look at the next one. Remember, ageru is doing something for someone else, but not you. Can't be you. So what if someone does something for you? And reshi, I'm going to use reshi's example first. It's very similar to the one that's in the sentence, in the reading, but theirs is a smidge more natural, and so I'm going to use theirs. Imoto wa asagohan no ryori. There's a slightly longer. It's ryori. This is how it would look. That ryo is a long ryo. Ryo shite kureta. So, imoto, my little sister, cooked breakfast for me. And with this one, there's two O's in the sentence. And so I'm going to go ahead and, since they jumped out and tried something like this, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it. Imoto wa asa. You usually want to avoid double O's. And with the cooking, the ryori, you can say, okay, cooking. What cooking is it? Cooking for breakfast. Asagohan no ryori o shite kureta. My little sister cooked for me. What did they cook for me? They cooked breakfast. Or what kind of cooking did they do? They did breakfast cooking. So, imoto wa asagohan no ryori o shite kureta. Now note, in Reshi's sentence, they didn't put the receiver. And remember, that's perfectly natural because with kureru, who's receiving that action? Who's benefiting from that action? It's the speaker. It's me. It's I. So it's obvious. So you don't need to put it. For clarity, on renshuu, if you're looking at the screen share, okasan wa watashi tachi ni ryori o shite kureta. Mom cooked for us. But you could drop out that watashi tachi ni because the kureru makes it clear that it's coming to you. Because it's coming to you, you don't need to say watashi tachi ni. You can just drop it like Reshi did and just say, oh, my little sister cooked for me. So let's practice this. We're going to practice all of them. A lot of practicing today. And think about something that someone did for you recently. Something that someone did for you recently. And let's follow Reshi's pattern. Let's not put the watashi ni because that's understood. But let's talk about something that someone did for you. And I'm going to give you a freebie. If you can't think of anything else, someone probably has helped you recently. You don't even have to say what they helped you with. You can just use the verb help, which is tetsuda. Flip that over to the te form and say someone helped me. So, I was coloring a picture. Now, he asked me to color it, but, after I started coloring, he helped me. So my son, Leo, he helped. Leo wa tetsudatte kureta. Who did he help? He helped me because it's kureru. And Kadrien, you're using the form that we used before. You received some Japanese sweets from someone, and you're right. It would be Nihon no, but you could do this. I'm guessing they brought those from somewhere. So maybe they brought them from Japan. Maybe they went to Japan and they got some sweets and they brought them for you. So this is it's kind of crazy because it's got the double te, but the verb motte kuru is to bring. So you could say they brought some Japanese snacks for me. Reshi looking good, except you need the te form. So instead of kaimasu, do katte kureta. There we go. Oh, and drop the small tsu in kureta. And you're good. There you go. Now, let's jump to the third one, and we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to jump back and kind of step away from it and talk about actually using these sentences, because there's a few ways that we use them that might not be clear, just by looking at the Japanese. So, let's jump to the third one. Now, this third one is different from the first two because remember, morale focuses on the reception, receiving something. Morale focuses on the reception. So in that case, the receiver is the most important thing. The receiver comes first. So take a look at this one. 学生は先生に言葉の意味を教えてもらいました. Kind of long, but let's break it down. Who's receiving it? 学生, the students, probably university students. Who are they receiving the action from? The teacher. Sensei ni. And then what's the action? 言葉の意味を教える. So what did the teacher do? The teacher taught the meaning of the word or words to the students. And that makes sense. That's something a teacher does for students. So the teacher taught the students the meaning of the words. Now, we're not going to practice this one because I'd rather step back for a minute and you can see I'm not sure if you can see the bottom of the screen, but we're almost at the end of this lesson, but there's something that's not in this lesson that is usually not taught, but it is something that really helped me when I started to try and use these myself. And that is, when do we use them? When do we actually use these? Specifically, all of these, well, not all of them, but typically these can all be used to describe the same action. We're just talking about the direction of the action, which direction is taking place. So let me give you an example. So let's see. With take a look at the last one, the last sentence, the one that's in green currently. 学生は先生に言葉の意味を教えてもらいました. Now, just to simplify it, so I don't have to type as much, I'm going to drop out the 言葉の意味を, and I'm just going to say the teacher or the students were taught by the teacher. So let's keep it really simple. Okay, here it is, the basic. 学生は先生に教えてもらった. This is focusing on the receiver. That means you could flip it. You could focus on the giver, and you could say this. Sensei wa gakusei ni Sensei wa gakusei ni oshiete ageta. Now, this is a bit of an aside, but I forgot to mention it earlier. Look at ageta on the end. Is there anything that makes you wonder or makes you think there's something strange about that second sentence, specifically with the word ageta? Does anyone notice anything? Not about, actually, it's not, you're close. Good try. But the actual lettering of the word, literally the way I wrote it. There we go. I mentioned kanji and that there's no kanji. Does ageru have kanji? Yes, it looks like this. It's the kanji for, up, going up. Helper verbs in general, and these are those verbs that come after another verb to help it, aren't written with the kanji. Even if the kanji might be used, if the verb is used as a standalone, helper verbs typically do not have the kanji written. So, with moral and kureru, those are usually not written with kanji, even if they're by themselves. They have kanji, at least kureru does, but whether it's by itself or if it's coming after a verb, you're going to see them in hiragana. Ageru, though, depending on the usage, you may see it with kanji sometimes. However, as you saw at the top of the lesson, te ageru is just hiragana. And so you'll see in the sentence, this first one, yonde agemasu. It mentions here in the little pop-up that, hey, there's kanji for it. However, with this form, it's used to show it's helping. And I'm not going to say that this is an official rule because it's helping. It doesn't use the kanji. I'm just saying that generally speaking, with these helper verbs, the kanji are not written. I'll give you one more example that we're not going to talk about it, but if you've ever seen the teoku one, oku being to do something in preparation for something else, the kanji for oku is this guy, to put something. But when the teacher says, go ahead and read this book for tomorrow, for tomorrow's class, go ahead and read this, yonde oku. With this one as well, the kanji disappears. So just put that aside. Okay, now that I'm back on track, let me copy and paste those sentences one more time. If these two things are describing the same situation, when would you use one and when would you use the other? Any ideas? Any ideas? Why would you use one or the other? I mean, you can say, okay, I want to focus on the teacher, I want to focus on the student, but that's not really something that we think about when we use language. Well, in this situation, let's say that I'm not the teacher or the student. I'm just describing, something I saw. Let's take me, the speaker, out of the equation. FIFO, you're not wrong, but there's another element to it. All right, I'm gonna let not the closeness either, but these are all excellent guesses. This is, to be honest, this is not something I think anyone could get on their own. It took me years to see this used enough to say, oh, this is when this is used. So I'm going to come back to what FIFO said. The main person that you're talking about, they come first. They're the topic. So why would you choose one over the other? With these two sentences, when you use, and let me copy it out and stick it down here so we can all see it right in front of us. When you use ageru, you're focusing on the teacher. You're focusing on the giver. And typically, this is an action that the giver, the main person, chose to do. By which I mean it was their volition, their will that the teacher said. Now this is the teacher's job, of course, but the teacher says, I'm going to teach the students. The teacher is doing it for the student's benefit. This is focusing on the teacher being the origin of the action. Now that might sound like it's a lot of obvious things. So of course the teacher chose to do it. So when would we use the second one? Let's take a look at, let me type out the teacher with this first sentence. There we go. The teacher made the choice to teach, the choice to do this action. The action originated from the teacher. So, no, it's not that. So look at the second sentence, and the people that are typing, let me ask you just to hold off so we can keep this text all on the same screen. Let's say, just imagine this. You walk in to the classroom, you sit down, the teacher starts teaching. That's the first sentence. The teacher starts teaching. However, maybe the class ends and one student, let's say Beluga, because they're the last person that typed. Maybe Beluga is a student and they go up to the teacher. I'm watching all this, of course. I'm watching this from the side. And Beluga says, hey, teacher, can you teach me this other thing one more time? I didn't quite get it. And the teacher teaches Beluga. The teacher teaches the student. We use the second sentence for that. So what's happening here? The teacher is still doing the action. The teacher is still teaching in both sentences. However, in the second sentence, the action took place because the student said, can you do this for me? There was a request made for someone to do this action for them as a favor for the students, in a sense, yes. So look at this. I'm going to translate this in two different ways. And the second way is going to include this meaning that I just mentioned. It's going to help the students you might say to that sentence, the students were taught by the teacher. Now, putting the passive verb tense aside in the English, this is focusing on the receiver of the action. The students were taught by the teacher. Now, switching this over to singular, because I was using Beluga as an example. The student had the teacher teach them. The student had the teacher teach them. The teacher's doing it to the student as a favor, but the request came from the student. The student said, hey, teacher, I don't understand this. Can you please teach me? Can you please explain it to me? This is when moral, te moral, is used more often. And that's why you focus on the student, the receiver, because the receiver did something. They mentioned something, they asked something, and had the other person do that for them. Saying that again, te moral is often used to show that the person receiving the action did something to prompt the other person to do that for them. If that is not the case, if the person, that's doing the action, it was their own volition, like the first sentence, ageru is usually used because you're focusing on Grace, exactly. Yes. The teacher went over, oh, I see you're having a problem. Let me help you. It would be more common to use the first sentence. Notice I'm not saying anything in absolutes. I'm just showing you tendencies within the Japanese language. Te ageru would be used more to show the teacher looking at something, and saying, I'm teaching them because I have to teach them. Or seeing a student struggling and saying, okay, I'm going to go over, I'm going to help that student. Oshiete ageru. The student's saying, hey, teacher, can you tell me the name? Can you tell me the answer for number 4? That is, oh, didn't quite type that correctly. I'll try that again. Oshiete moratta is having the teacher teach us. FIFO, I don't recommend that. So let's take this concept, and up until now, we've talked about I'm watching all this from the side. Like, I'm not a student, I'm not a teacher, I'm just watching, the teacher and the students interact. So how do we make this change when we're involved? When I say we, I mean I mean the speaker. So now we're talking about these two. We're stepping aside. We're talking about te kureru and te morao. Both of these can be used when I, the speaker, is involved in the sentence. So I'm going to retype the sentence real fast, so give me 1 second. Now, this is a really simple sentence, but sensei wa oshiete kureta. The teacher taught me for my benefit. Sensei wa oshiete kureta. I'm not throwing in any extra things. Just keep it simple. Sensei wa oshiete kureta. Who did the teacher teach? Me. That's clear because it's kureta. And this is because the teacher came in, and without me saying, hey, teacher, teach, without me being an obnoxious student, the teacher came in and taught us, or taught me. Thank you, teacher. This is how we would use this. However, if I am now the student saying, hey, teacher, can you explain this question to me? Then I'd switch it around. Sensei wa, or actually probably be more often ga, since you're probably telling this to someone for the first time. Sensei ga oshiete moratta. I had the teacher teach me. I had the teacher teach me. That had is what really glues all this together. I said, hey, teacher, now this isn't in the sentence, but before this, I had the teacher say, hey, can you do this for me? And they did. So one of the ways I like to split these up is I like to think of te kureru is something being done for me that I didn't ask for. Now, you might argue, if you're a student, you're asking the teacher to teach you, but I'm talking about a literal, hey, teacher, please teach me. Te kureru is something where you didn't ask for the thing to happen, but it happened and you're like, this is great. So you often see te kureru being used when someone does something for you that's a surprise, that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did this. So if your friend buys you a new game, and that's pretty cool of your friend, and they come over and they say, hey, look at what I got you, the new game, and you're like, oh, game o katte kureta? Wow, you bought this game for me? Thank you so much. Like, I didn't ask you. This is amazing. Thank you. That's te kureru. That's te kureru. Someone does something for you that you don't ask for. Now, however, if you ask someone to do something for your benefit, then, so let me give you a different example. Let's say, you are going to meet your friends and at the station, and you're going to meet them at 5 o'clock. Now you're late. You're really late. You get there at 5:30, and they're still there waiting for you. What would you do? What would you say? You'd say something like, "Wah, mate kureta? You waited for me? You didn't have to do that. Thank you so much." They made the choice to wait for you. However, same situation, it's 5 o'clock and you know you're not going to make it. And you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm running late. Can you please wait for me?" And they say, "Sure, yeah, we can wait." Then afterwards, in recalling this, you might say, "Mate moratta." I had them wait for me. And of course, having someone do something for you is a beneficial action. They're doing it for your benefit. So if you're ever wondering, if you're focusing on you, which one do I use? Teikureru is for, I like to say, a surprise. It's an unexpected thing or something you didn't ask for. Te morao, however, is something that they did for you. Ultimately, they still did it for you, but typically it's something you ask them to do, or you suggested that they do it for you. I had to leave work early, so I didn't have time. I didn't have time to clean up, so I had someone clean up for me. And oh, there I go. I still can't type. I had someone clean up for me, and I get home, and someone says, "Wow, you're home early. Why did you get home so early?" "Oh, I had Kao-chan clean up for me." かおちゃんは掃除してもらった。So whether you're dealing with ageru and moral or kureru and moral, whether you're involved or not, you can see this, hopefully you can see this difference coming up where moral with actions is typically used when the person receiving the action made some request. I'm going to type that out for you. Te kureru and te ageru, though, is when, the act of doing it was made by the person doing the action. There's no request. Typically, there was no request involved. So Grace has, I knew this question was going to come. Grace has a really good point. When this is typically in casual speech, but if the way I see it is that when you're going to be late and you ask them to wait, it's in this situation, the way I see it is that you're asking them for something that if they said yes, it would kind of be a surprise. It'd be like, "Oh, could you wait a half hour for me? Could you do that for me?" And there's kind of a sense of it feels to me that there's a stronger sense of them not needing to do that. Like you're asking for something above and beyond. And so them saying yes to that would be surprising. "Oh, it's wow, 30 minutes. That's really late, but could you wait for 30 more minutes? Really? Thank you." Where the te moral feels like there's less of there's less the request being made is not as strong. So if I said, teacher, could you please teach this to me? I don't understand. I had the teacher teach that to me. That's not a particularly large burden on the teacher. If you say, hey teacher, can you please teach me? So temporal is usually something where there's not a huge, the ask is not particularly large. Kureru is coming back to that I didn't know they were going to do it for me, or I wasn't expecting it, or it was a surprise. I didn't ask them to. And in that surprise one, they're doing something big enough to where if they say yes, it's kind of a surprise. And so in casual speech, you will hear teikureru used sometimes when you are asking someone to do something for you. So if you hear it used that way in the question form, and it's always in the question form when you're asking them, you might hear, ne ne, matte kureru? Will you wait for me? But typically when you're describing an action that's already taken place, you're going to use those forms above that I described. When it's already happened, the kureru is usually for something that's surprising, not expected. Morao is usually something that the receiver asked for. But very good question. You know, as a lot of you probably are starting to learn, when you get into casual Japanese speech, you start to see variances and deviations from the quote unquote standard patterns that are used. And they're frustrating, admittedly, at the beginning. But as you get used to them, you can start to see, you know, the nuances that come in behind them. That being said, I think we are done for today almost. I'll leave it up for just a couple more minutes in case there are any questions. But otherwise, I believe we're done for today. You know, this lesson is in renshuu, and this lesson will be made available online in the Discord and at a later point inside of the renshuu app itself. But I see a few people typing. While they type, I will say, if you leave this lesson and you don't feel 100% about the material, don't blame yourself. These are hard concepts. These are difficult concepts. The act of taking a second adjective, or excuse me, a second verb to describe the relationship, the beneficial relationship between the action and the giver and the receiver, it just doesn't exist in English most of the time. You know, you might just say, for me. My friend bought this book for me. And they just add that for me and everything's done. That's it. It's very explicit in the Japanese language. And so it does take, you know, it does take a while for this to sink in. But this is, you hear, once you understand these, the te ageru, te morao, te kureru, you hear them nonstop. Because people are always doing things for other people. They're always doing things for other people. And it's important in Japanese to make note of that. To say someone did this for me, or I did this for someone else. So Grace, I'll end with yours. That's actually a really interesting example to use, because if you made a cinnamon roll, I'm going to just keep it short and say you made the roll and then gave it to them, you'd actually be using the ageru, which is the to give, if that makes sense. ロール、cinnamon roll を作ってあげたい. I want to make it. And there's actually a bit of ambiguity here, because it could be 作ってあげたい means I want to make a cinnamon roll for someone. With the understanding being that if you made it for them, you would give it to them, right? You aren't just making it for them and say, hey, look at the cinnamon roll. It's not for you, but I made it for you. that's not common. And so tsukute agetai could be seen as I'm making it for their benefit and with the underlying meaning of I will give it to them. Or it could be that this is actually two separate verbs. I am making it and I am giving it to them. But that's an interesting sentence because it could be translated in two different ways, but ultimately the same thing is happening. You're making something for them and you're giving it for them. Yeah, basically. It's just using the basic te form. And in that second action, you make it and you give it to them. That giving it to them shows the beneficial, it has that element of it benefiting them in there. So you wouldn't have like a double ageru. You wouldn't say agete ageta. That wouldn't work. You just need the one. But excellent question. Thank you so much, everyone. And I believe we are done.